You released the acoustic version of Undefeated today.
Yeah.
Uh, what made you decide to release it acoustic, and what things do you maybe prefer, or what differences do you appreciate about recording acoustic versus electric?
I mean, I think I like the idea of having acoustic versions of albums out there. It's a thing I've done a few times. In full disclosure, I remember, God knows how long ago now, but Billy Bragg put out a record called Mr. Love and Justice that had an electric version, an acoustic version, the same thing, and I thought it was kind of cool. And I play solo shows pretty regularly, and for a lot of the songs, this is how they were born. Just me and a guitar before I took them to my band to arrange them into the finished official versions, as it were. Not all of them, I should say. Actually, some of them, came together more organically in the room with my band or whatever. Excuse me. But a lot of them kind of were born in this sort of format, and it's how I often play them live. And there is a kind of at the center of what I do, there is this idea of kind of maintaining that spine, if you like, of the sort of paradigm of the troubadour. Do you know what I mean? One person with one instrument. I love my band to pieces, and obviously, the way the songs sound on the album proper is how I ultimately envisage them. But it's a nice thing to share with people, and there are people who prefer the acoustic versions, and it's nice to keep them happy. In terms of recording and stuff, I mean, it's just much easier because it's a couple of microphones, and just getting a good takedown, as opposed to weeks and weeks of checking phase correlation on drum microphones or whatever it might be. So it's definitely an easier process.
And I guess like with the initial version of the album, what did it mean to you to record that, to put that together? Um, I guess talk about how that all came together for this one.
Yeah, I mean it's my 10th album, which is a lot of albums, and I do try and sort of check myself, if you like, and just sort of make sure I'm not just making a record because that's what I do and for the sake of it and churning one out and all that kind of business. I want to make sure that I have something to say, that I'm not repeating myself, all this kind of thing. So the whole process sort of started with me. I had some ideas come together and it was like, is this worthwhile kind of thing? And I felt like it was, and I hope that people agree in the final analysis. But then it's a long process, the making of a record. I mean, every album I've done represents usually around 2 years of my life, in
Mhm.
terms of writing, demoing, taking it to the band, working up arrangements, editing, chopping and changing, trying different approaches, and then the recording process, which for this album actually was really lovely. I moved to the countryside. I have a recording studio down my garden, just down there, and I produced the record myself, which is the first time I've done that. First time I was sort of able to do that because my pandemic project, if you like, was learning how to engineer and produce recorded music. So, and I like to think it went well.
I think
Other
it went
people
well.
can judge. Well, thank you. But yeah, so it was the actual recording process was lovely. I live by the sea, so we were kind of swimming in the morning and recording in the afternoon, and
Oh,
it was a rare thing, a British summer. So it was a nice process, and yeah, I'm really pleased with how it came out.
that's great. I'm glad. Um, and now, do you have a favorite song off the album?
Well, you're sort of not supposed to, right? I mean,
Right.
it's like choosing between your children. It's generally frowned upon. Having said that, there's a few. I mean, they're not interchangeable units. Hopefully, they sort of cover different emotional and musical and sonic territory.
Mhm.
I think the song "Somewhere in Between" is a really important song for me. It's one of my favorite songs I've ever written, and actually, on Sunday we have a new music video for that coming out, which is a real sort of piece of art. I like to think so. That's coming too. And then, I mean, I love the song "Show People." I love the song "Ceasefire." I love lots of them.
And now, when I talk to artists, sometimes I like to get an idea of kind of what inspires them at the time, like what art they're consuming. So,
Sure.
is there any book you've been reading, or any TV you've been watching, any films, any music you've been listening to that has really been inspiring to you lately?
Yeah. I mean, for this record particularly, I mean, there's a not all that directly in terms of the music, but sort of philosophically, like Nick Cave is a big kind of signpost for me, if I
Mhm.
can describe Nick Cave as a signpost, but I just did. Um, his sort of attitude to his art is really important to me. The other one, there is a psychologist, a psychotherapist, in fact, who's called Irving Yalom, And my wife turned him onto his work because she's a psychotherapist. And he writes very profound philosophical kind of works about the human mind and emotion and relationship with your own past and that kind of thing. There's a line in the title song of the album, Undefeated, and the line is "Giving up on hope for a better past," which is an Avignon Yalom line, a quote, if you like. But there's a few others scattered through the record, and that was very influential on this album.
Awesome. And now some of the songs, not just this album, but throughout your career, they've dealt with some like sadder topics and experiences. Um, I tend to think, and other friends of mine who listen to you, pay attention to your work, tend to think you have a very positive demeanor and a positive outlook on life. How do you keep that with um, just everything, everything that you write about? I guess.
Sure. I mean, I guess it's a funny thing. You're not the first person to say that. There's lots of people who've kind of noted that I sort of tend to have a kind of optimistic, positive vibe to a lot of what I do, which incidentally, a lot of which is inspired by the PMA thing of kind of mid 1980s hardcore, New York hardcore, the Positive Mental Attitude, Bad Brains, Gorilla Biscuits, Youth of Today, those kinds of bands, which were remain very influential on my thinking about the world. But it's consciously constructed in the sense that, like, I'm not sure that I'm habitually an especially optimistic person. It's more that it seems to me that if life is what it is, which is, a veil of tears, however you want to put it, it's like, where are you going to put your energy? Where are you going to expend your available resources? And it just seems to me that, like, it's more worth my time kind of trying to find things to be positive about and focusing on those than it is bemoaning the dark side. That's not to criticize artists who do bemoan the darker side, if you like. And I've already mentioned Nick Cave, and a lot of the music I like is very kind of doomy, for want of a better expression. But I just think, for me, and a lot of this is about shows as well. It's like the purpose of a show for me is to raise the roof, raise the weight of the world for a few hours for the people who've come down. And you wouldn't need to do that if the world was a lovely, beautiful, perfect place, which I don't think it is. But it's worth doing that in order to try and sort of make some positive contribution to the world. That's how I see it.
That's great. Now, kind of transitioning to the show. You
Mm.
talked about, wanting to raise the roof, wanting to always bring that energy to people. What can people coming to this show expect?
Well, I mean, the sort of the boring and mechanistic answer is me playing for a couple of hours with my band and some great supports that I've picked myself. We've got Bedouin Sound Clash from Canada and the Bridge City Sinners from Portland, Oregon, both of whom are bands that I adore and that I think that people will enjoy. So that's the dull answer. But I mean, I think, philosophically, I like my shows to be participation sports. Like, at the risk of sounding like my mum, you get out of anything what you put into it. You know what I mean? And I like to try and kind of break down that artificial barrier between performers and audience. I want the show to be, at the very least, a conversation rather than a monologue. And there are some heavier topics addressed, but it's fun. Hopefully, I want people to get their rocks off. I want them to have a good time and have a dance and have a sing and feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. That's certainly what I get out of it.
As someone who has, seemingly gone everywhere, you talk about it in a lot of your music, the road being, I guess, the most direct example of it.
Sure.
And, calling your tour the never ending tour of everywhere. Um, Coming to Buffalo, what is something here that's like unique that you appreciate, I guess, while you're in the Western New York area?
I mean, I've played in Buffalo a bunch of times. I played a very early doors show in Buffalo at Mohawk Place, I believe it was,
Hmm.
with my buddy Donny, who used to put me up. I used to stay at his house, and I do remember a story to tell. As I mentioned, I'm a big sort of hardcore punk fan, and Donny invited Daryl from Snapcase to come and see me play to about 50 people in a bar. And this is back when I used to drink a lot more than I do now, and certainly before shows as well. And I'd had enough to drink that I'd kind of forgotten that Snapcase are a straight edge band. And I was sort of about to go on stage, and Daryl's a lovely guy, and I'm a huge fan of his music. And I was pouring out shots of whiskey, and I was trying to give him one, and he was being very polite in his refusal. And I was like, "Don't make me look like an idiot," kind of thing. or perhaps a slightly harsher, less radio friendly word than that. And he politely demurred. So I sort of drank both of the shots that I poured out, went on and started doing the show. And about three songs in, it suddenly just sort of dawned on me halfway through a song what I had been doing before the show, and that I'd be making a fool of myself. But also, I mean, it's worth saying, and I'm sure everybody says this, but as an English person, buffalo wings are not a thing in the UK. It's not a sort of recognized concept. And on first coming to America and discovering the American Embassy, or B Dubs, or as it's also known, and sort of getting into the concept. So I've been to the Anchor Bar, and I will be going again.
Awesome. And is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to talk about?
Not especially. I mean, I'm very excited to be back on the road. I'm very excited to be back in Buffalo. It's been a while, and my apologies for that. But the Town Ballroom is such a great gig, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Frank. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much as well. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too.